Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to be diving into the falsehoods and injustices of Leo's teachings with actualize.org. It's taken me a while to start to really get into this, even though I've kind of alluded to it. Because I really try to give him lots of time to awaken to perhaps more light, to change his ways. Because he's one of the most, I guess, from all the compared to all the other teachers, he has the most ego, basically. And he still seriously thinks that his ego is God. And he's trapping masses of people with this and telling them that he's the most enlightened being above all the other teachers, even though he's not even close to the other teachers, like Shayamarti. Like, he's not even close to either of us. Not just me, but also the other teachers. So even though I talk about, it seems that I'm lumping the teachers together, but I know they're not the same. Like, the levels of light, I know roughly speaking where they are in terms of levels of light and closeness to Christ, basically. But I really, generally, I try to, give people lots of chances and lots of time to try to realize more things. And I think he has done some of that, but he's still seriously trapped in his ego. And as a result, I have no choice now but to start to talk about the obvious falsehoods with his teaching that his followers just cannot see for some reason. So I'm calling this part one because I have a feeling I might have to make more videos like this. I hope not, but I might have to in the future to get into more things. But in this video, I want to talk about it in one sort of aspect that he's been teaching that is just very obviously false and low conscious. And it's in regards to, his views on relationships, dating, sex, gender, this kind of stuff. So if you are someone that followed him, you know that he talks about pickup, like, constantly. Since almost like day one, basically. And, it's like changed to some extent, but it's still the fundamental nature of what he's trying to teach, like, men, is still the same. And he sees no problems with it. Same with a lot of his followers sees no problems with it. But because most of his followers are biological males, that's one reason why they don't see a problem with it. So they continue to talk about women and girls. Like, most times they don't even refer them as women, they just refer to them as girls. Right? That's already like a very teenager kind of way of talking about people you want to date or something. So this is just like totally bizarre to someone like me, because you look at the other teachers, like, none of them talk about dating and relationships like this, like talking about pickup constantly. And he truly thinks that because he's the only person talking about this openly like that, he's more advanced than all the other teachers. There's one of the ways he seriously deceives himself into thinking that he's the most enlightened being, even above Jesus Christ, for example. So that's why it's important for me to try to dive into this topic, because it's one of the most obvious things that he's teaching, and his consciousness that is obviously very low conscious. So I've been following him since almost like the beginning, not quite the beginning, but I followed, like, I guess around 2016, I think, like, his videos. So I did follow him for quite some time, and I had started participating on his forum, I think around 2020, roughly speaking. So he kind of presented himself one way in videos, but when I started to interact with, his forum and seeing what he was saying on there, basically, this was, like I said, started like 5 years ago, roughly. I started to notice that what he was saying on the forum did not match up with what he was teaching. Like, there was just this big gap between how he was behaving on the forum, especially in relation to this pickup thing that he keeps talking about on his forum. Like, this was just, like, very odd to me. And as well, I should mention that because of my biological gender, which I was a biological female, and it wasn't until after I seriously started awakening that I started to identify as, like, non-binary and such things. But because of my previous life, you could say, that I did live as a woman, and having had experiences with the opposite sex, you could say, with men, I was more sensitive to what he was talking about. in relationship to pickup and dating. So that's something I want to mention. Why I think most of his followers cannot see through the problem with what he's trying to promote there, while claiming to be the most enlightened being. Right? Keep that in mind. This is really why I'm talking about it, because he's constantly going around telling his followers that he's the most enlightened being, that nobody has figured out God like he has, nobody understands epistemology, metaphysics like he does. Right? So he's constantly claiming this on his forum and blog to his followers. But the way he's living his life and talking about, you know, dating and relationships is like totally unconscious. And so as a result, that can't be the case that he's the most enlightened being. You see what I'm trying to get at? So that's why I'm talking about this. Uh, so it still kind of shocks me that to this day, he's still talking about women like by ranking them like on a number system, like out of 10. So this was something he has been doing when I first started to participate on his forum. He was constantly talking about girls on a scale of 10, whether they're 8 or 9 or 10, like in terms of their appearances. Right? This is already like shocking to me that this so-called teacher, spiritual teacher, is talking about, other people like this. And that nobody seems to object to what he's saying. And to me, because like I said, I am still, I was a biological female. I was very sensitive to how he was talking about women. It's actually very offensive to me how he talks about it with his followers. So he just constantly seems to feel that there's nothing wrong with how he talks with girls, how, it's okay to basically manipulate them, like emotionally. That's what I gather, is he's sort of using these like tactics to manipulate them into having sex with him. Like, that's really what I'm gathering, because these girls that he's sleeping with are obviously not nearly as awake as he is, and cannot see through what he's really doing. And, of course, I don't know the details of his life, because he doesn't reveal that to people in public, but so I'm just basing my analysis based on what I can see. Based on what he's saying about this topic. So he's constantly trying to promote this pickup lifestyle, basically like serial dating kind of lifestyle to his followers. And he considers that like as like a more advanced way of life, basically. And it should be no surprise that, he lives in Las Vegas. And it sounds like basically the people in that city has normalized this kind of lifestyle. Or a lot of the people there, it seems. Because that kind of lifestyle is like completely bizarre to where I live. Like, let's say, it's like you can live like that in most places. So I just want you to consider that he's trapped not only by his followers, who are mostly males, and as well not as sensitive to what he's teaching about pickup, and as well that he lives in the city where his behavior is more tolerated and normalized, right? Because that's kind of what Las Vegas is known for. You get lots of travelers and people just like going there to party and having some kind of one-time experiences, right? It's like that's kind of normalized in that city. And so as a result, there's probably not a lot of backlash on the kind of lifestyle that he's advocating for. That's what I'm trying to say. So the way he talks about dating is just completely like, you could say, it's really gross to someone like me. Like, it's utterly unconscious. He treats women like some kind of object. It's very obvious that he sees them as just a means to an end. There's really hardly anything more than that. It's just like meat grinder kind of situation. That's how he talks about them. And how he talks about he can just like manipulate their feelings, basically. And he truly believes that the way he's approaching his life like this makes him the most God-realized person on the planet. So do you see how utterly like self-deceived he is, and his followers, who also believes that he's the most God-realized being? Whereas from my perspective, it's like you're not even close. Like, you're the opposite of God-realized, right? Like, it's like you don't care about how other people feel. You don't care about how women really feel about what you're doing. And I know he's kicked out some women before that he's complained about this pattern of his and advocating for this like pickup lifestyle. He's banned like other women on his forum before, who started to complain about this. So as well, I want to share, because I've lived as a woman, I have been on the receiving end of men who do this kind of thing to me. So that's also why it's important for me to speak about this, because most spiritual teachers, like they're biological males, right? And just look around, most of them are white males, the vast majority of them. So they don't have experience like what it's like, let's say, being on the receiving end of this kind of pickup behavior. But I have had experience with that kind of thing. And so, especially when I was younger and more naive and didn't know better, right? I was not as conscious as when I started to awaken. So there was a time period where I was tricked by this kind of tactic, pickup tactic, you could say. And because almost every relationship I ever tried to enter or did enter, I was very genuine about like my feelings, because I was not one of those people that wanted to manipulate other people's feelings. But I have been on the receiving end of that, so I know what it's like to be on the receiving end of being manipulated. And as a result, I have experienced many heartbreaks from such kind of men. Um, and that actually did play a role in me reaching to Christ's state as well. So I don't know how aware he is of the consequences of what he's trying to promote, but I know from my end, this kind of behavior is very toxic, and it's not loving at all. Like it's like anti-love, right? You're just using someone for your immediate pleasures. You just treat them like, they're just an object to you. And being on the receiving end of that is very ugly. It's very like, if you're a conscious person, you don't want that. The only way that you can get away with it is on people who are extremely unconscious and don't realize what you're doing. That's the only way you can really get away with such things, right? Over and over. So I'm saying the woman she's constantly like trying to sleep with, they're not conscious enough to see through his bullshit. That's really what's happening, and that's why he keeps getting away with this kind of thing. So this is also where, like, it takes more awareness to see through this kind of manipulation in the first place. Because even for someone like me, I couldn't see through it, like, for a long period of my life. I had to seriously awaken to Christ's consciousness to start to see this. Like, so you see how, as a result, the vast majority of women in this world cannot see through the manipulations that someone like him would be trying to influence on them. And so it's very obvious to me what he's doing. But unfortunately, because his targets are, from the sound of it, most of the people who are just not very awake, he sees no problem with it, right? And so, for someone like me, it's like, it's just very shocking to me that he still thinks that he's the most enlightened being while promoting a very toxic lifestyle. That, of course, he doesn't think is toxic in the first place, because he couldn't continue on like this if he did think it was toxic, right? That's how self-deception works. You think there's nothing wrong with what you're promoting and doing. So that's why I'm making this video. There's not too much to say about it, because it's just so obvious to someone like me, like, how low conscious you are. That you're completely self-deceived, that you think you're some high conscious being. Talking about how you understand God and love and epistemology. Like, are you kidding me? You haven't even figured out the basics. This is like a very basic thing, like how you treat others. Right? You degrade the other when it comes to the opposite gender. You don't talk about men like this, but you talk about women like they're some kind of object to be used. It's very obvious to me. I don't care how you sugarcoat that, but that's very obvious how you talk about them. You talk about them like they're animals, basically. That's really the vibe you give off, how you talk about them. And so, nobody's pointing this out to him openly. So I have to do it, because, I see it very clearly, even though, again, it's not like a pleasant thing to talk about. But I have no choice, because there's just so much falsehood in that alone, that you can consider this person as some kind of legitimate God-realized spiritual teacher.